Ever feel like you're drowning in a sea of articles? You know, the ones you really need to read, but they're so dense and academic.
Oh, tell me about it.
Well, today's deep dive is here to throw you a life preserver. We're diving into the work of Dr. Jamie Horrocks, a leading voice in the world of learning differences.
Right, Dr. RX.
We're looking at their incredible collection of articles from the outside, and let me tell you, they don't shy away from the tough stuff.
Definitely not.
Classroom strategies, critiques of education policies. We're talking a full-on reassessment of how we think about literacy. So are you ready to have some assumptions challenged?
Always up for a good challenge.
Let's dive in.
One of the things that struck me right away is how Dr. Horrocks dismantles this whole one-size-fits-all approach to literacy.
It's like they're saying, hold on, what if everything we thought we knew about learning to read was wrong?
Exactly. They argue that people don't learn to read in just one way. Instead, they highlight two distinct approaches: analytic and Gestalt language processing.
Analytic versus Gestalt. Can you break those down for us?
Sure, think of analytic learners as detectives. They're breaking words down into their smallest parts, sounding them out phonetically, letter by letter.
The classic phonics approach.
Right. But then you have Gestalt learners, they're more like artists. They see whole words and patterns, grasping the meaning almost instinctively, much like you or I might recognize a familiar face in a crowd.
So it's like some of us are deciphering code while others are seeing the whole picture at a glance. That's fascinating.
It is, and here's a crucial point. Dr. Horrocks argues that a lot of reading struggles come up because traditional teaching methods often favor that analytic code-breaking style.
Meaning kids whose brains are wired for a Gestalt approach might feel like they're doing something wrong, even though they're just learning differently.
Unfortunately, that happens far too often, and that's what makes Dr. Horrocks' work so important. It doesn't just point out the problem, but it actually offers solutions. They provide strategies for teaching both types of learners effectively.
I like it. So what are some of those strategies? And then they hit us with article titles like, Where's the Science in the Science of Reading? I have to say, that one made me a little nervous. It's like Dr. Horrocks is challenging this whole movement.
It's definitely a bold move, questioning something with science, right there in the name.
Right. But they're not saying phonics is a bad thing, are they?
No, not at all. Dr. Horrocks isn't anti-phonics. Their main concern is when it becomes the only approach, potentially leaving Gestalt learners behind.
So it's more about broadening our understanding of effective reading instruction. It's not phonics versus Gestalt.
It's about recognizing that different learners need different approaches.
And Dr. Horrocks even questions whether outside factors, beyond just pure research, might be influencing some educational trends.
Right, like maybe there are other forces at play.
Now that's a bit unsettling, isn't it? To think what we learned or how we teach kids today might be influenced by something other than what's best for them as learners.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Okay, but before we go down that rabbit hole, let's get back to what Dr. Horrocks offers in terms of practical advice, because it's not just critique, right?
Oh, absolutely not. They offer a ton of practical strategies that educators and parents can use no matter their experience level. It's about empowering everyone.
And that's what I appreciate about their work. So what are some key takeaways?
Well, early intervention is huge. Horrocks argues that waiting for kids to struggle before offering support is a disservice.
Makes sense. So how do we do that? How do we actually support these diverse learners in the classroom?
That's where Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, comes in.
UDL.
Yeah, UDL. Imagine a classroom designed from the ground up to be flexible, adaptable to individual needs, instead of trying to adjust things after the fact.
So it's not just acknowledging that different learning styles exist, it's baking that diversity into how we teach.
Exactly. Dr. Horrocks is a big advocate for UDL, and they provide educators with a ton of resources on how to implement it. One example that really stuck with me was about a geometry lesson. Instead of a one-size-fits-all lecture, they presented the same concepts in multiple ways, visually with diagrams, through hands-on activities, even using music.
Wow. So it's like a buffet of learning experiences. Students can gravitate to what clicks for them.
Precisely, and it benefits everyone, not just students with diagnosed learning differences. It acknowledges that every brain is unique and learns best in its own way.
That's amazing. This sounds like a radical shift in thinking about education.
Yeah.
But where do we even begin?
Well, Dr. Horrocks gets into specifics for both analytic and Gestalt learners, covering different age groups and subjects. They offer practical guidance on everything from classroom setup and lesson planning to assessment strategies. It's all designed to support diverse learning styles. It's about giving educators the tools to create a truly inclusive learning environment.
That's fantastic. It's exciting to imagine what education could be if we truly embrace this approach.
It really is. And I think one of the most important takeaways here is that literacy isn't a one-size-fits-all thing.
Right, we need to ditch this idea of one right way to read.
Exactly.
We've talked about empowering educators, but what about parents? How can they help put these ideas into practice?
Dr. Hurix emphasizes how crucial it is for parents to be advocates for their children's learning.
Advocates, okay?
Don't be afraid to ask questions, If something doesn't feel right, challenge the status quo and look for resources that make sense for your child's learning style.
So if a child is struggling, it's not always a case of them not trying hard enough.
Exactly. Sometimes it's just a mismatch between teaching methods and learning style.
And that's where advocating for things like differentiated instruction comes in.
Absolutely. Or flexible learning environments. And especially early intervention.
It's about parents and educators working together. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. Dr. Hurix is really making us rethink some fundamental assumptions about literacy.
Totally. They're saying it's time to move past trying to fit every kid into the same mold.
And instead, embrace the amazing ways our brains learn. This deep dive into Dr. Horrocks' work has been incredible. For those who want to go even deeper, and I really encourage you can find their articles in the Outside.
It's a goldmine of information, whether you're an educator, parent, or just passionate about creating a more inclusive and effective learning experience for all students.
And as you explore these ideas, we'll leave you with one final thought. What kind of learner are you?
Ooh, good one.
Think about your own experiences with education, your strengths, your challenges, the times you felt most engaged.
Because understanding your own learning style, that's powerful.
It is. It's the first step to advocating for your needs or the needs of a child you care about.
Couldn't agree more.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those conversations going.